Want to get back to that breaking news coming out of downtown Houston involving the punishment of former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines. A jury has reached a verdict in the sentencing phase of this trial. Goines was convicted for the murders of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. They just brought Goines into the courtroom, and we are going to see if they're about to read that sentence. Let's listen to the judge.
In clause numbers 1862491 and 1862492. We, the jury, having found defendant Gerald Goines guilty of felony murder, assess his punishment and confinement in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 60 years and assess a fine of $10,000, signed by the foreperson of the jury. In clause numbers 1862492. We, the jury, having found the defendant Gerald Goines guilty of felony murder, assess his punishment and confinement in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 60 years and assess a fine in the amount of $10,000, signed by the foreperson of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, similar to what we did before, we're going to poll you. This is going to be your numbers that we're going to mention. If this is your true and accurate verdict, you say yes. If this is not your true and accurate verdict, you say no. Again, with 34, I believe the number is, and we'll say 34 foreperson. Okay? All right.
Juror number 1?
Yes.
Juror number 8?
Yes.
Juror number 16?
Yes.
Juror number 22?
Yes.
Juror number 34?
Yes.
Juror number 52?
Yes.
Juror number 94?
Yes.
Juror number 108?
Yes.
Juror number 67?
Yes.
Juror number 34, foreperson?
Yes.
Juror number 72?
Yes.
Juror number 80?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, for the final time, I don't have to give you the admonishment, but I will be back to formally excuse you from your jury service.
All rise to the jury.
Please have a seat.
Go ahead and sign. Let me know whenever you're ready.
And you just heard it live. We brought you the sentencing of former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines. A jury sentencing Goines to 60 years in prison, along with a $10,000 fine. Investigator Mario Diaz is outside the courtroom right now. Let's get the latest from him. Mario.
Women of the jury spending just under 7 hours to reach a guilt and
We just got out of the courtroom. Forgive us. We're obviously making our adjustments and getting out here, Andy, so I'm going to just go right to it. Gerald Goines, 60 years on both counts. Your thoughts? We'll begin with Rick DeToto.
I think a message has been sent to HPD by this jury. 60 years for a former Houston Police Department officer that's been convicted of murder. Never heard of this before. It's such a unique case, and I think the community, the Harris County jurors, sent a message to HPD that this won't be tolerated.
What does this sentence actually mean, Casey? How many years will he be behind bars for certain?
Minimum of 30 years. So at his age, he's going to be 92 years old by the time he's eligible for parole. So essentially it was a life sentence.
Is that 30 years on each count, or is it just 30 overall?
30 overall. They will run together concurrently.
Joe, your thoughts when you saw the verdict come down and what you saw to Goines inside the room?
I mean, he was pretty stoic, just kind of had his head down, just listened to what happened. I did see his lawyer, Nicole DeBoard, have some words for him after. We'll never know what she said to him, but pretty somber, very quiet mood in the courtroom.
There was one moment there that you did see Gerald Goines. He turned around, he looked at his family. They were all sitting just to the left of him. He gave him a wink and a smile, and then a minute later, his fate was completely sealed. But very good point on that, Joe. He looked like he was a man completely defeated standing there at the very end.
This is devastating. He's lost his freedom. He's probably going to die in jail. He knows that. His family knows that. And this is the dramatic parts of what we do as lawyers and what happens in these courtrooms. We saw in real time this man lose his life, lose his freedom, and it's very difficult for everybody involved.
Casey, how powerful was that image of this man who, if you remember, back on the night of January 28th, 2019, you had HPD, Art Acevedo, saying, this man's a big hero. He's a big lug, a teddy bear. We all love him. And then you see him as a shell of a man being found guilty and sent to prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, his health just appears to have dramatically declined from day one of this trial to now today. And I think, too, Mario, we need to just piggybacking off what Rick just said, we need to remember the effect that this is going to have on law enforcement in general. And it's going to create a huge distrust for law enforcement. And I think that's an even greater impact in addition to what has already occurred.
Lesson set is what I'm getting, Joe.
Right. I mean, this case, like they've just said, this stretches well beyond Gerald Goines. I mean, yeah, what happened to him, like Rick said, dramatic. He's going to die in prison effectively. But this is the community putting their foot down and saying, look, just because you have authority doesn't mean you can abuse it. And in this case, this officer abused his authority in the worst way with the worst consequences you can have. And the community has spoken as you can't do that around here anymore.
Do you anticipate that there will be an appeals process? Do you think that Nicole DeBoard will appeal this verdict and try to get Gerald Goines off on these charges?
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout the trial, the lawyers are making objections, and they're making a record for purposes of appeal to preserve those objections. So there's no doubt about it, 100%. Either the lawyers now or some new lawyers will file something regarding an appeal.
And Casey, does the uphill battle for a potential appeal here, is it that much greater considering the fact that this was such a high-profile case, and at the center of it you had someone who was supposed to serve for the people but did not serve?
Well, I think the most difficult part about this appeal is that we had two very good sides. Both sides did their job. You know, appeals are easy if somebody's failing at their job, but both sides did a great job, so it's going to be an uphill battle for sure.
Joe, Nicole DeBoard, Max Seacrest, this is a massive defeat. Without a doubt, everyone thought that they did a great presentation. They end up losing, not small, they lost very big.
Well, I mean, the facts are the facts. They are two of the best lawyers that we've ever had in the state of Texas. Max Seacrest literally writes the book on criminal codes in the state of Texas. So it doesn't get any better than these two. But they can't. They're not wizards. They can't make things up. They had to deal with what they had to deal with, which was Gerald Goines, who was a giant of a man. Two people and their dog died. And one thing I want to add to what Casey said, it wasn't just both sides who did a fantastic job in this case to make an appeal difficult. It was also Judge Nelson, who ran this show just shipshape. It was great.
We must highlight that. You have to remember, this trial started back on September the 9th. Here we are 5 weeks in now, officially. 5 weeks in this week. This is the 5th week. And you didn't have any significant distractions, with the exception of Gerald Goines having his medical episode last Thursday. Aside from that, Judge Nelson has kept this very much in order throughout. So kudos to her. Were you surprised that she was able to manage a case the way that she did without any significant interruptions? And I'm not taking anything away from her. It's more along the lines of because we know what this case is about.
Yeah, in these high-profile cases, people come out of the woodwork. There's all kinds of things going on behind the scenes. People are trying to get their time on TV or trying to insert themselves into the cases. So I'm not surprised. She's a really good judge. She has an athletic background. She's used to structure and control, and she did a great job, and I'm not surprised at all.
Gerald Goines is now now being portrayed as a convicted killer. He is being touted on headlines across the state of Texas and nationwide. How does that make the process of sending him to a Texas prison more difficult for the state to, in a weird way, ensure that this is a safe prisoner behind bars?
Well, I think that prison is the worst place for a police officer because you're going to have people in prison who don't like him. You're going to have the people who run the prisons who don't like him. So unfortunately, it's just not a very good location for him to be.
But how much difference is the fact that you have Gerald Goines with this documented history? This wasn't an officer who just committed a bad night of drinking, had a DUI, and was sent to jail. This is an officer who had a track record of convicting people, sending them to prison, and now he finds himself with that reversal of fortune with the lives of two people on his hands.
No, that's an excellent point. This isn't just, you're sending a police officer to prison where effectively everybody there hates police officers. You've got a guy who, because he was in narcotics for as long as he was, sent a lot of people away for a very long time, many of whom are still there, and some of whom, as we've heard in this courtroom, may be innocent of the crimes that they were convicted of. So that's going to add a completely different layer to his time in prison.
All right. You've been a part of this now since the very beginning. We've been talking about this case, all of us, for almost 2 months now. As we wrap things up here, any surprises as to how everything played out?
It's such a unique case, and I think we were all trying to make our best guesses based on our experience in trying cases like this. I think the biggest surprise for me was the quickness of the guilty verdict. We thought with the complications of the jury charge, I thought it was a stretch to get felony murder from the tampering with the evidence, so that was a surprise. The punishment, it wasn't a surprise. These things go back and forth. It could take 7 hours, it could take 13. But for me, that was the biggest surprise, the quick guilty verdict.
Casey, I see you nodding your head. Is that what you take away?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Rick, and at the end of the day, the jury was given law and they followed that law. So,
Joe, the biggest surprise here for you, knowing everything you know about this case to now?
Big picture, were there any surprises? I agree. No, not really. I think if you'd asked us a few weeks ago, we all would have said we'd be right here where we are. Now, the road to get here was a little different. The Art Acevedo turning off the body cams, maybe the sergeant having his own off-the-books body cam, Gerald Goines' medical episode last week. So this trial had a lot of twists and turns, but from start to finish, we ended up right about where I think we all thought we would be.
And it doesn't end here. What people at home have to understand is that if you're the Tuttle family and if you're the Nicholas family, you have been waiting for this day for over 5 years. You do get justice here on the criminal front. However, you are still awaiting justice on the civil front. And we know that that trial is about to ramp up here in a few more weeks. It's set to start up in federal court in November. How is that process any different than what we just saw here?
Well, I think the Tuttle family got what they wanted, justice, and I think the person that's happiest about this verdict is the civil lawyer because he's now got an advantage as he goes into the civil trial. The civil trial will be pretty much exactly the same. There's obviously different rules of evidence and different ways of presenting stuff, but it should be basically the same with the same type of evidence. And the prosecutors gave the civil lawyer a roadmap to get to where he wants to go in terms of civil liability.
Will Gerald Goines be in the courtroom during the civil trial here that they have coming up with regards to the families, or is he going to be held behind bars? Can anyone jump in on that?
So if you remember several years ago, the Clara Harris case, the dentist in Clear Lake who ran over her husband, I actually worked at the DA's office then. I went across the street to the civil courthouse, and they bench warranted her back in from TDC. And what's interesting about a civil case is the plaintiff's lawyer, the Tuttle and Nicholas family's lawyer, can actually call Gerald Goines to the stand and force him to testify. He won't answer any questions, but they can put him on the stand.
And we have to remember here, because I'm going in order. We have this trial, we then have the civil trial, and then we're going to have the federal prosecution. We are still up in the air with where that process stands, because there isn't a date set for that trial. Casey, you know this process well. You've been involved when you have the state and then the feds. Do you believe the feds say, okay, he's got it pretty much, the state of Texas did a great job, or do you think they still try him from the federal side?
You know, this is interesting because usually it's flipped in reverse. Normally the feds try the case first, and then the state says, okay, they got what they needed, we're done, and the state dismisses their case. So it'll be interesting to see what the feds decide to do.
Any thoughts from you, Rick, on that?
I just think there needs to be some communication between the federal prosecutors and the district attorney, Kim Ogg. She she's outgoing, so I don't know how it'll work. But there has to be some communication regarding the strength of their case in federal court and what they see happening. So I'm not sure a decision will be made anytime soon.
Joe, I look at it from the perspective the feds have a slam dunk here. They got the state of Texas already getting the win. They get an easy win to pad their record. Is that not what would happen in the situation?
I mean, it could be. You still got to go through the jury process, and in federal court, the jury pool comes from a different area. It comes from all over the Southern District of Texas, which is not just Harris County, but many of the surrounding counties.
All the way down to the border.
Right. Well, we'll get from the Houston division, so that's mostly our contiguous counties around here, but you'll get people from Waller or Chambers or wherever. So, it's a completely different animal over there. The charges will be different. But if the feds do decide to go through, I mean, he won't ever see the light of day.
So, just to give everybody an understanding here, we are speaking with Joe Venus again, Casey Gonzalez, Rick DeToto. We've been speaking here for roughly 10 minutes. I can tell you out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking down this hallway, I have yet to see any members of the prosecution come out, any members of the DA's office, meaning one particular member, Kim Ogg, or I have yet to see the defense attorneys come out. We do know that the defense attorneys are not going to be talking because of the civil trial. Gerald Goines will not be issuing any kind of statement because of the civil trial, not to us, even in writing. And the Tuttle family, we're waiting to see if they provide us with any kind of statement. Can any of you recall a situation like this as such a high-profile case where everybody wants to hear from the parties involved, but yet no one will because of another case on the horizon?
This is a case that's made for a movie or for TV, and just like you described, there's so many different moving parts of this case, the uniqueness of the criminal trial in terms of the state case, there's federal charges pending, there's a big lawsuit coming against the city of Houston that could result in millions and millions of dollars. So it's absolutely made for TV, and it's just unique, and we're all trying to find our way through it as it goes on.
Casey, you have sent many murderers away when you were in this office. What is the process now for someone like Gerald Goines, who has been convicted, has been sentenced? Where is he at right now? What's going on behind the scenes?
So he's going to be here in Harris County Jail until he's transported to a prison bed, so somewhere in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Typically that takes about 6 weeks to happen, so he will be here in Harris County until he's transferred.
Will they give him an inmate number now that he's been convicted officially tonight?
Yes, he will.
So he will have an inmate number with the state of Texas. And do they give him a new mugshot because it's the state of Texas and they have to give him one for the state?
When he goes to the Texas Penitentiary, that's when he will get his new mugshot, his fingerprints, his identification, all of that. So in about 6 weeks is when that will happen.
Joe, when you speak to your clients and they go to a Texas prison after they've been convicted and they find that this is the reality of their life, how are they changed in your opinion?
I mean, it kind of depends on.
Early on.
Yeah, so, there is certainly a shock in an adjustment period to their new home, essentially, and going through not being around their family and not being able to leave and just at somebody else's mercy. So that's really kind of an emotionally devastating act for somebody to have to go through.
Rick, you had the last high-profile case here in Harris County, the case of A.J. Armstrong. It didn't come out on your end. You are in the same position as a Nicole DeBoard and a Max Seacrest. What are you telling your client behind the scenes as this is news that's news to them, but obviously it is their reality?
So I'll preface this by saying that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, is going back there with that young man and sitting with him as he cried, and he knew he was going to spend the rest of his life in jail. There's nothing you can say. I put my hand on his shoulder. I sat with him for about 45 minutes while he cried. There's really nothing you can say to that person. It's devastating. Their life is destroyed. They know they're going to prison. They're going to leave their loved ones. For AJ, it was daughter, his child, and his wife. So it's a very, very difficult thing, and it's one of the hardest things we have to do as criminal defense lawyers.
I will say the most powerful thing as we wrap things up here, to me and Casey, you and I were sitting together commenting on this, was that throughout this trial, you started to see the slow, basically shadowing of his body, of Gerald Goines. And then today, when the verdict came down, you just saw him like this. He was like this. He was just like, he's done. Inside, you could just tell he was mentally defeated. But the headline right now is that Gerald Goines will be going to Texas prison. The former HPD narcotics officer sentenced here in the last 20 minutes to 60 years in the case of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, the two homeowners who were shot and killed after a deadly raid back in 2019 on a January night. They were made out to be enemies of police. It was all wrong. it was all made up. And the man who was responsible for it today has been sentenced to prison. That's the very latest from here at the courthouse. For Joe Venus, Casey Gonzalez, Rick DeToto, I'm Mario Diaz, KPRC2 News. Back to you in the studio there, Andy.
Mario, before we let you go, we've got two victims here, Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, 60 years per person. Do these sentences run together?
So the sentences do not run together. I just want to get clarity on that. They run together. I mean, I'm sorry, they do run together. Forgive me. They run. Let me have the lawyers clear that up. But yeah, they run at the same time. Is what you were saying. I got you on that, Andy. Go ahead.
Yeah, so they run concurrently, so at the same time. So 60 years total is what he will get, not 120. 60 years total. He will have to serve 30 years before he is eligible for parole.
And again, he just turned 61, Andy, during the course of this trial. He turned 61 the day before he was convicted. Before a state of Texas parole board can hear his case, Gerald Goines will have to be 91 years old.
All right, this case certainly highlighting significant issues within law enforcement, particularly the use of no-knock warrants. Our thanks to you, Mario.